The reversion to the cool, calm, quiet shade of the Greenwood will take our footsteps past the digital age, past the industrial age, back into the realm of folk and fairy tales, back into the realm of romance and the heroic quest. You are the archetype, the hunter, searching for that elusive magical deer. We are both artistic and technological beings. We are souls embodied and expressed through our flesh, our bodies, expressed through our wielding of both art and techna, as we act upon nature, as we manipulate and shape nature, as we exploit and caretake nature. From the Greeks and Romans sculpting stone statues in temples, to the Irish monks penning the Book of Kells, to the Anglos and Danes carving their Viking runes into wood, let us consider agricultural tools and weapons and jewelry, ships and buildings. Consider airplanes, cars, computer programs, and music. Because the human soul is embodied in flesh, and because the human soul is actively technological and artistic, we carry within us a paradox, a tension, a conflict. We are possessed by both Mars, war, and we are possessed by Aphrodite, love, at different times. This reaching forward in time and backwards in time for a utopia is typical for us. And another paradox within us. It is most striking if we compare the modern world view, seen most obviously in the industrial and digital ages, against the genre of romantic poetry and folk and fairy tales. Our aim is to glimpse this primordial world's view. Let us put to the side the wonders, blessings, and benefits of the industrial and digital ages and briefly examine its underlying worldview. Let us try and look with fresh eyes at the default modern worldview, this strange matrix machine master parasite, this strange best buddy terminator who could aid us or kill us, this strange hippie Gaia-worshipping prostitute priestess. Modern worldview is characterized by many facets: democracy, scientific positivism, liberalism, rationalism, atheism, egalitarianism, feminism, anti-colonialism, humanism, and globalism. Yet still, it has undercurrents of capitalism, aristocracy, and deep religious fervor in its liberalism, particularly the vibrant New Age spirituality which overlaps with neo-paganism. The Internet was developed as an American military communication tool, developed by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. In the 90s, we had this novel new thing called the Internet. It was the read-only Web 1.0, where only programmers wrote websites. After that, we had the more interactive read and write Web 2.0, where the public could both read and write websites. Web 2.0 is characterized by complete collaboration in the multidirectional sense. As we accelerate from the industrial into the digital age, modernity is now characterized by another new religion, dataism, the idea that what truly matters is data. Everything must be cataloged by the Internet. Everything must be measured, known, understood, controlled through data. This utopian global project is a perfect horizon that never arrives. Nonetheless, if there is a problem of human nature repeating itself, the solution is always more science, more democracy, more government expansion, more soft power social engineering through the education system, journalism, even Hollywood and Netflix. Overall, the modern worldview is quite different from the folkish, the romantic, the primordial worldview that we're searching for, amongst the shadowy, tangled trees. The individual living in the digital age lives in the fashion of an ant or a bee, in the global hive mind, a collective hallucination of digital images. In this age, there is no science, but a constant bombardment of words, music, images, and icons. In this age, there is no mystery, no privacy, no sense of the secret or the sacred. But the religious dogma of modernity is endless progress, and progress, so-called, is rarely even questioned, and difficult to oppose. Again, another generation asks, who am I? Where is my tribe? What is even real anymore? Enter Catholicism and paganism, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the brothers Grimm, and Carl Jung. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge is arguably the most perfect execution of romantic narrative poetry ever. Romanticism in English literature spans roughly between 1790 and 1850, and some of its chief authors include William Wordsworth, William Blake, John Keats, Lord Byron, and Mary Shelley. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was an English poet, literary critic, philosopher, and theologian. His father was a reverend and a school headmaster. Young Samuel was an avid reader and a brilliant prodigy from the age of 6. He was a sickly child. He suffered from rheumatic fever, for which he was treated with laudanum. This would later become a lifelong opium addiction. This addiction would ultimately lead to his divorce from his wife Sarah, the mother of his 3 children, a quarrel with fellow poet and good friend Wordsworth, and painful, embarrassing bouts of sickness and constipation. Coleridge, after an unrequited love, impulsively enlisted in the British Army under a false name, and then his brothers intervened and arranged for his discharge, under claim of temporary insanity. Coleridge established and published the journal The Watchman, and was the chief founding intellectual of the Romantic movement. He was a visionary, rising star with a cult-like following. Enter our narrator in Coleridge's poem, a gray-bearded mariner or sailor telling his story to his terrified listener, a young wedding guest, who was previously enjoying his hedonistic party life. This narrator, this elderly, spooky mariner, is the lone survivor of a ship's voyage, a ship cursed and doomed with mass death because of the crime he committed. Now we behold an eerie sight, a supernatural vision. Is that woman all her crew? Is that a death, and are there 2? Is that death that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold. Her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare life and death was she, who thickened man's blood with cold. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. The game is done, I've won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. Here is a vision of the supernatural after the death of the crew, the golden-haired woman, life and death, playing dice with the grinning skeleton of death. The metaphysical, the magical, the eerie, the haunted, as well as the angelic, are all typical hallmarks of the romantic style. Not romantic in the modern sense of Valentine's Day, but romantic in the proper definition of the word. What was this ancient mariner's crime? And why is he called ancient, rather than just old or aged? And a good south wind sprang up behind. The albatross did follow, and every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. Because this ancient mariner murdered the white, pure, innocent, playful bird, out of an evil whim, a superstition, or an impulse of spite. And so he cursed the ship's crew unto death when he killed the albatross with his crossbow. The wind no longer blows. The ship runs into dangerous, icy waters. Supplies run low, and then there's no more water to drink. Death, a grinning skeleton, strikes down all the crew. The corpses hit the deck. All except for our guilty mariner. But why not? Where's the justice in only the murderer surviving, when the rest of the crew die? Perhaps our storyteller's roaming, his wandering afar and the telling of his tale to the unenlightened, is his lifetime of penance. The man has penance done, and more penance will do. The notion of penance is deeply Catholic and deeply resonant. Coleridge chooses the albatross as the true center of the poem. The sentiment for animals signaled by this is made during a historic shift from farming to industrial life. During this time, Britain begins to shift from hand tools to machines and to the steam engine. What was the result of this? The result was that masses of people moved into the cities for work. Less people lived close to the land, interacting with the animals on the farm and working in rhythm with the seasons. The shift for the artisan and tradesman was from quality of wares to quantity of wares. This accelerated production rates with the invention of machines. The speed of production and money profit became far more important than anything else. Now, our mariner survives the ship of death, and there is a lesson in the poem. He prayeth best who loveth best, all creatures great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, He made and loveth all. Here, daily social life is linked with prayer. This is Christian love, which finds its wellspring in our Creator. Spiritual themes are typical of Romantic literature. Alternatively, or in addition, the albatross could be interpreted as a Christ-like symbol. In a similar way, neo-paganism is also a return to nature and to one's folk, a return to blood and soil. A quiet, assumed Christianity and paganism are explicitly and implicitly the core of Romanticism. They're also the beating heart of both fairy and folk tales. In Coleridge's day, England or Britain was a wedding of British, English, Danish, Norman, French, Scottish, and Irish folk. The country had become a wedding of agricultural life with mechanistic industry, a wedding of religion, and scientific empiricism. Let us now wander deeper into the Greenwood and spend time with our friends of old, Snowdrop or Snow White, and Little Redcap or Little Red Riding Hood. These fairy tales, among others, were collected by the Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. The brothers were born in Germany, and after the tragic passing of their father, who was a respected lawyer, they had only their aunt and grandfather to support them. The brothers struggled their way through poverty, asthma, and scarlet fever. The brothers shared the same room at school and bed at home. They studied law, history, and German, Scandinavian, and Irish literature. Later, the brothers lost their mother, which was exceptionally hard on them. Jacob and Wilhelm, working as librarians and studying 12 hours a day, eventually compiled and published their magnum opus, Grimm's Fairy Tales. Characters in fairy tales are different from other genres. They are not psychologized individuals with first and last names, with internal thoughts often revealed in internal monologues. Rather, they're archetypes or classes. Their identity is precisely equal to their action in the narrative. Action is identity, and identity is action. They are archetypes or classes, for example, queen, princess, wolf, dwarf, huntsman. Identity is fixed, and social hierarchy is embraced as natural law. Every character dwells within their proper place in the story. These characters are always distinctly masculine, solar, or feminine, lunar. Fairy and folk tales are essentially entertaining wisdom stories, passing down the accumulated experience and knowledge of a folk to keep the wisdom alive. The stories represent the soul of a people. Snowdrop's innocence, her beauty, and her kind benevolence is confirmed by events in the narrative. That is, as she lays sleeping in a death-like sleep, she's mourned and bemoaned by the dwarves and even by the birds in the forest. Truly, the dwarves and the birds are devastated. And the coffin was set among the hills, and one of the dwarves always sat by it and watched. And the birds of the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop. And first of all came an owl, and then a raven, and at last a dove, and sat by her side. It is believed by many that animals can sense a benevolent heart in a person, that animals can also sense a malicious intent as well. This narrative event, the dwarves and the birds watching over Snowdrop, tells us all that we need to know. There is no internal monologue of feelings or speech from the character. The behavior of the dwarves and birds testify to the truth that Snowdrop was truly beloved. The birds can be interpreted as signs, symbols, or icons associated with Snowdrop's qualities. This is subjective and not an exact science, But an author can draw upon culturally understood symbols, or else they can create their own symbols through building a network of associations in their narrative. We could possibly interpret the symbols like this: owl, night, hidden, feminine wisdom; raven, darkness, death, Morrigan, pagan goddess; dove, white, purity, innocence; Holy Spirit, third person of the Christian Holy Trinity. Brian Moon wrote extensively about symbols in his work on narrative theory. He theorizes 3 classifications: the iconic, the indexical, and the symbolic. These are similar though slightly different ways that signifiers can represent the signified. Todorov, the literary theorist, wrote extensively about the structure of a fairy tale. The plot he defined as explicit events in narrative sequence, and story he defined as the explicit events in the narrative sequence together with the unseen events inferred by those explicit events. Todorov also wrote about the equilibrium to disruption to new equilibrium, the typical pattern of stories. The queen, stepmother, exists in an equilibrium of toleration with Snowdrop, until the fairy looking-glass triggers the queen's jealousy, disruption. After multiple murder attempts by the queen and multiple actions of Snowdrop making friends with the dwarves, finally a prince marries Snowdrop, and then the stepmother queen literally drops dead with jealousy. Snowdrop being a wife and the queen being dead is the new equilibrium. Now let us turn our attention to another classic of the Grimm's fairy tales, Little Redcap. Our heroine, Little Redcap, was caught in a dangerous spot because of her endearing naivete. So she ran from the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a prettier one farther on, and ran after it, and so get deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Little Redcap, on her way to deliver a gift of cake and wine from her mother to her grandmother, is tricked by the wolf's pretty lying words. She's tempted to play and wander off the road and get back to her duty later. This fairy tale is a warning to the young and innocent who cannot conceive of the consequences of living in a world of free agents, who may choose to lie, who may choose to act with evil violence towards others. Civilization and laws may be violated and smashed at any moment. Of course, the red color of our heroine's cap is associated with youth, beauty, and sexuality, and the wolf is a hungry, dangerous masculine symbol. The pursuit of Little Redcap by the predator speaks to sexuality and the potential thrill and dangers of being an object of men's desire. No doubt this story was conceived as a warning to young girls of the folk. In this fairy tale, luckily the huntsman, who is acquainted with the grandmother, appears at the right moment, and he cuts Little Redcap and her grandmother out of the wolf's belly. Because the huntsman is masculine, solar, and represents the active, competent, and virtuous man, and because Redcap is innocent and feminine, lunar, she is rescued, without question. Nonetheless, next time, though, Redcap and her grandmother must fend for themselves as they are stalked by a second predatory wolf. Now that they have become wise to the reality of evil, wise to the devouring nature of the wolf, they must deal with the second wolf and kill the predator themselves with clever trickery. They must deal with the real. Carl Jung, a Swiss academic, was one of the earliest pioneers of psychology. He was a student of Freud, and he was a student of many religions, or perennialism. From the Greek words psyche, soul, and logos, word, thus we get psychology, which is a recent development. Jung was an intellectual giant and a true pioneer, applying the scientific method to the social and metaphysical realm of dreams, which was a new approach. He is credited with the following ideas: the shadow, the unconscious repressed darker human aspects, the anima and the animus, the masculine and feminine aspects within the human, as well as the collective unconscious, a type of psychic collective sea of dreams. Moon wrote about signs in narrative. Todorov wrote about character archetypes in fairy tales. But Jung wrote about archetypes beyond the literary sense. Rather, he wrote about these types in a psychological and spiritual sense, which is something else, something on a higher level. Stories are a catharsis, for the teller and for the listener both, a healing balm to those wounded by life, wounded by love or hate or by loss. They are a way of making meaning out of the confusion of this life. But stories are more than that. Through storytelling, the individual ego is suspended and submerged in the generations before and after. This present is bounded by individuality, bounded by time and by space, is united in empathy with another life's perspective, united with the nation, united with the collective, with humanity. The question is, what story have you chosen? What archetype will you embody? Or what archetype or what story has chosen you? Return to the Greenwood, Hunter.